We got one more guest here for this Thursday edition of Bang the Book Radio. That is professional handicapper Tony George from Doc Sports. Tony, how's it going today, man?
Oh, going good. Busy. Bowl season, getting bowl plays out. College and pro basketball's on a monster roll, and so gearing up for a big weekend in hoops in college, the finals week. So it's been a little light on the plays, and light on the board's been a little light as well. So gearing up for that, and of course, being a Kansas City Chiefs fan, living there for the last 12 years, and growing up in Lincoln, Nebraska, being a Chiefs fan, so I was knee-high to a grasshopper. A little bit of anticipation about a huge game tonight on Thursday Night Football in the NFL.
Yeah, we'll chat about that one here in a little bit between the Chargers and the Chiefs, but I want to start, you mentioned bowl season, and there's a lot that goes into bowl season, as we discussed in that previous segment. So general bowl betting tips from Tony George. You've spent a lot of time in this industry. Obviously, the bowl games have kind of evolved and changed a little bit, as you've been around the sports betting world. But in general, Tony, what are you looking to take advantage of?
Well, some things always remain the same, when it comes to college bowls. There's as much as the sports betting business, has evolved in the 26 years that I've been doing this, in the information age and the internet, and, used to be able to get a wager in at Leroy Sportsbook downtown Vegas, at -3 and run across the street and it'd be, -7 and you could come back the other way, and all those days are over. But some things, as much as they change, they remain the same, and it's all about motivation in these bowls, And also, a lot of coaching changes, a lot of coaches have left, affecting a lot of different games. Nowadays, you've got players sitting out for the draft that are huge impact players in games that change the entire, dimension of a football game. So at the end of the day, those things all remain the same. And obviously, you got a lot of a little brother taking on big brother type scenarios in numerous games there, and you can expect the unexpected, I guess, is the number one thing here. You don't want to be laying around big numbers in these bowl games. It's not prudent. And you say that, Adam, and you have the top two bowl games, I guess, for lack of a better term, with the final four teams both having double digits in them. And, at the end of the day, when you get to these bigger BCS, Big Six Bowl type scenarios, just remember, nobody's there by accident. I cannot stress that enough, and no one's going to go quietly in the night. But, I look for motivation. I look for teams that have good defenses. And I look for teams, that got a 500 or better record on the road, to teams that played well away from home, especially even from smaller conferences. So just a few of the items there, but the bottom line is motivation. Stats still don't lie, at the end of the day. You still handicap the stats, you handicap the key numbers, you look and see if there's any coaching changes, you look and see if there's anybody sitting out, and you look and see if there's some value in over a fall number of 6 or 7 and getting some points in these bowl games.
Well, and you mentioned coaches, too, and the thing of it is nowadays, it's not just head coaches, it's coordinators, too, because,
Sure.
A lot of head coaches aren't calling plays. They're sort of delegating those tasks. Maybe in the past you had more head coaches willing to call plays. Now you've got more head coaches that want to leave it up to the coordinators, still have some of their own input, of course, but now we see coordinators left and right getting some of these vacant FBS jobs. So that's, you have to go to the coordinator level, too.
Yeah, you do, and that's the thing about, it's nice when you're making $1 million, $2 million, $3 million bucks a year as a head coach and have a losing season. You can just blame a coordinator and fire him. That's a convenience they didn't used to have down the road, where we all knew handicapping games that the guys calling the plays on the defensive and offensive side of the ball many times was not Bobby Bowden. Bobby Bowden was a hood ornament for Florida State the last 10 years he coached there. But you also have some old school coaches like Bill Snyder and Tom Osborne that are gone by the wayside now. Congratulations to Bill for finally retiring. One of the best coaches in college football that no one ever talks about. But, at the end of the day, some of the coaches are still involved and active in the game planning and, calling plays either on the offensive defensive side of the ball. But these coordinators, they make a difference between wins and losses, and you need to really take a look at that and see who's losing who and adjust accordingly, put it that way.
Now, as you said, Tony, you've been in this business for 26 years, and something that's really, over the last 10 or so years, I would say, really come to the forefront would be, derivative betting, first and second half betting, and then obviously live betting as well. You mentioned motivation, and, we talked about this angle a little bit here this week that, motivation may be a really good angle in the first half for a game. Maybe in the second half, a team kind of realizes, hey, you know what, we're here anyway. Let's go ahead and play. Have you found that, you're maybe doing a little more first and second half and live betting stuff in the bowl games now these days?
Well, especially since I moved to Las Vegas. It's legal out here. Put it that way. You can do it elsewhere, but for the purposes of having a family show here, I will just say it's legal out here, and I've got, stations of William Hill and a CG app on my smartphone, and a lot of times you'll see a football game where someone's just not going to show up. The one thing, and you can go ahead and hedge back the other way in the second half and recover what you bet up front based on, analysis and everything that you've done, and just some teams just aren't going to get off the frickin' bus. And you're able to bet it back the other way, and watching as many, hundreds of thousands of games that I've watched over 26 years, it's about the eye test. At the end of the day, that comes with experience. But you see a team, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're giving up on plays, they're not gang tackling, this, that, or the other, just certain little indicators that you see where it's really not going to change, especially later in the season if a coach has lost a team or they're not playing hard for a coach or this, that, or the other. Green Bay a couple weeks ago was, before they fired McCarthy, you could see they were giving up on plays. There wasn't any fire in their belly. Things weren't going to change at halftime. As a matter of fact, they probably sit in the locker room and roll their eyes up when McCarthy's in there, pissed off and losing it. They don't give a rat's ass. So you see some of those things, you're able to bet into them. I would say consensusly, probably 80% of the betting public does not have that at their fingertips. Right now, including the listeners on your show, those of us fortunate enough that do have it, however, are taking advantage of it.
All right, one game I wanted to talk about here specifically with you coming up on Saturday, the Las Vegas Bowl. I don't know if you're going to head out and watch this one there at Sam Boyd Stadium, but you've got Arizona State and Fresno State. Opened 3.5, had a draft announcement with N'Keal Harry that drove this number up to 4.5, kind of hovered there, came back down. Now it's yo-yoed back up a little bit. Fresno State a 5-point favorite, even a 5.5 at Bookmaker. What do you think about the Las Vegas Bowl, Tony?
Well, I want to go to this one, that's for sure. It's going to be a good football game. Fresno State's a very good team, second in the country in scoring defense. Unfortunately, what we just talked about was, players that are sitting out. And Neal, the wide receiver for Arizona State, is out in this game. He was their biggest playmaker on offense, had over 1,000 yards receiving. Obviously, going to be a first-round draft pick, doesn't want to take any chances. I don't know whether I agree with that or not. I suppose if I'm him or his agent, I would agree with it. Don't want to blow your knee out or, snap an Achilles tendon, playing Fresno State in the bowl game where there's nothing on the line other than a little bit of pride. And, sometimes money's worth more than pride, obviously, with these college kids. I don't blame them. But I think that changes the complexity of this game. And, Fresno State, Jeff Tedford, this guy, he's done nothing but cover spreads since he left Cal there at Fresno State. You heard a lot about Scott Frost last year. Turned around a one-win program. I think last time Central Florida lost was against Arkansas State 2 years ago. I mean, they're still rolling, but at the end of the day, you heard a lot about Scott Frost and the turnaround he did. Well, Tedford did a hell of a job of turning around Fresno State. They've got a defense that is absolutely no joke. They won a conference championship in the snow at Boise State, on pretty much a last play of the game type scenario. But at days in here, without Arizona State having that wide receiver, their biggest playmaker here. I'd lean Fresno State in this one.
You and obviously I know that you've probably got some things queued up over there at Doc Sports, some college football plays that you're looking at. With these early round of bowl games here, a lot of people like to say, bet the dogs early, bet the favorites late. Are you seeing these early bowl games, the ones, between now and Wednesday, sort of setting up that way? Or do you feel like, maybe the favorites are just a little bit too good in these matchups?
I think maybe the favorites are a little bit too good in some of these, and you've got some short lines, you've got, games, Ohio, San Diego State, the Middle Tennessee game comes to mind, down in New Orleans. At the end of the day, you could talk about zigzag theory in the NCAA tournament and all these different, catchphrases and buzzwords we've used in the past. They don't hold as much water as they used to. At the end of the day, you got a lot of these, these games that are, less than 4 points. Tulane game less than 4. Fresno hovering around 4.5 or 5. Eastern Michigan, Georgia Southern, 2.5, 3 points. The Middle Tennessee game, App State's laying a big number there. But then you got, I'm just talking about games before next week. Next Thursday, when we talk again, the UAB's 2.5, San Diego State, Ohio, Frankie Solich laying 3. They pretty much are saying that most of these games are even for the most part. They're just tagging one team that's got a little bit better record than the other one. But just remember something, perception is not reality. And a lot of times, you take a team from the Sun Belt and say, well, the MAC conference is just stronger. So they should just, Northern Illinois, Ohio, that sort of thing. These smaller conferences now, these teams out of these smaller conferences, have a lot of talent, a lot of great players. They all got 300-pounders on the line. They all got guys that can fly on a 4.3 40. They got quarterbacks that can chuck it around, throw the ball 30 yards on a string, and they're mobile, and they do RPO and everything else. So, the board is a little bit, I think, more stable. And, a lot of these early games actually are very, very tough matchups, Adam.
I think so, too. And I think it kind of speaks – I think you and I have talked about this a little bit before, and I think we kind of framed it with the Nebraska football program in mind, going back to the 90s when, everybody wanted to play for that blue blood premier type of team. But the disbursement of talent nationally now in college football, there are a lot of conferences that have, 3- and 4-star types of recruits. There's always that 2-star that comes up from a small conference and becomes a first-round pick, something like that. The disbursement of talent is just so much different in college football than it used to be. And I think you kind of see that play out sometimes in the bowl season.
Yeah, you do. And then a lot of guys say, well, Tony George lost this player. Tony George lost. You go to some sports forum somewhere, and, he used the word parody as a scapegoat. Well, it's not a scapegoat. It's a fact. And and people have discussions on discussion boards. Well, if Alabama would have played, or if Oklahoma would have played in the SEC, they'd have been a 5-loss team, and this, that, and the other. And if Central Florida last year would have played in the SEC, they wouldn't have had a winning record. Well, I don't know. They went to bowl game and beat the hell out of Auburn. I can tell you that much. So, there's just more parity in these leagues, and they're just building a better – back when I played in college, whenever you're – on a draft, on a recruiting board, when you're, 5'11", 170-pound Midwestern farm boy, and you got schools recruiting you in high school, like when I was in high school in the 80s, trust me, that's not going on nowadays. They build a better athlete. These kids have all this specialty training. They play in specialty leagues. They have nutritionalists. They have personal trainers. When they get to college, these kids are – locked and loaded and ready to play some ball. And you think about that, how Bill Snyder built Kansas State from the absolute worst team in America, to being a powerhouse in the Big 12 and giving everybody a ball game. He did it with JUCO players. he brought in players that were JUCO kids, coached them up because they had enough talent. Maybe they didn't have the right coaching. Maybe they didn't hit the rivals board or whatever. But you find these coaches go out like Bill Snyder did, pick up these hidden gems that are quote-unquote JUCO talent. Next thing you know, they're bringing it, at a BCS 5 level. And so, yeah, it's there's a lot of parity in football. And if Team A doesn't want to show up against Team B because they're pissed off during this bowl game, Team A is going to get their butt whipped. I can tell you that right now.
All right, let's transition over to the NFL side of things here. And before we talk about the Thursday night game, I just want to talk about the card overall in general. We're starting to see some activity here on Thursday afternoon as I'm looking at the odds screen. But, when you look at what's going on here this week, one double-digit favorite, it's the Rams. They're a double-digit favorite because Carson Wentz isn't going to play. So the adjustment to Nick Foles drove that number to double digits. We've seen a lot of double digits here over this NFL season. But we also have Jacksonville laying more than a touchdown against Washington. Atlanta laying more than a touchdown against Arizona. We get some of these games here late in the year, Tony, where it's really hard to lay some of these numbers with teams. But, just by looking at the landscape of the NFL, maybe they're justified?
Well, I don't think so. It's still the NFL. I think there is a shitload of opportunity on the NFL card this weekend. Most teams have established their identity. You don't have a lot of guesswork. A couple of teams make you scratch your head. The Steelers make you scratch your head. The Carolina Panthers still making you scratch your head. Philadelphia getting 10.5 against the Rams, who have sputtered down. I know they're 11-2. Look at their last 3 games, the Rams. What have they done to impress you and raise your eyebrows? I got the answer, nothing. Oh, by the way, Nick Foles won a Super Bowl last year, for crying out loud, was MVP. And you're going to give him 10.5 with a back against the wall? That's an automatic teaser play and probably an automatic straight-up bet. It's no different than college football down the stretch. And we're in the final stretch. We're in the last furlong, so to speak. We've rounded the turn at the Kentucky Derby on the home stretch. Things just don't come that easy this time of year. They really don't. NFL players, as much as everybody says, they're throwing in the towel, nobody throws in the towel. They're getting paid $1 million a game. They're playing for next year's contract. They're playing for free agency. They're playing for incentive clauses in their bonus incentive clauses, money in their contracts, X amount of tackles, X amount of sacks, X amount of catches, X amount of yards, whatever the case might be, everybody's going to bring it, and nothing comes easy this weekend. And I see some lines. What's Jacksonville done to warrant laying 7 against anybody with Cody Kessler quarterback in that offense? And here's the next question. I'll ask you this, Adam. You know what wins in the NFL? Quarterbacks. You going to take Aaron Rodgers, or you going to take Michael Trubisky, who looked like crap in his last game, I might add? And you're going to give Aaron Rodgers 6 points? You take the better quarterback. Kind of makes tonight's game a little bit of a toss-up. You got Phillip Rivers, future Hall of Famer. Patrick Mahomes continues down this path. He's going to be a future Hall of Famer. But, you tend to take a look at teams that take the better quarterbacks in these teams. And I think there's a lot of opportunity out there. I'll tell you this much right now in the NFL this weekend. It's going to be a big dog weekend. You want to lay 7 with – I'm looking at these and, just based on your question to me, I'm looking at these. The worst quarterback in a lot of these games is laying more than a touchdown. It's insane to me.
No, it's completely fair. Minnesota, 7.5-point favorite. What have they done to warrant being more than a touchdown favorite? And
why?
That's the thing.
Why? The quarterback sucks. They just fired their offensive coordinator.
I don't know. It's not like Minnesota's going to play in the cold or Miami's going to play in the cold, too. It's an indoor venue. So this week in the NFL, it's weird. And when you get – see, to me, I think I kind of overthink it, and maybe a lot of the listeners fall into that category where I see some of these bad teams laying big numbers or these marginal teams laying big numbers, and all I obsess about is what am I missing? And maybe it's just the whole, if it waddles like a duck and quacks like a duck kind of concept.
Yeah, and, I mean, literally. Okay, Arizona sucks. They're a horrible team. They went up in the frozen tundra and beat Green Bay. Now you're giving them 9 against Atlanta with the most dysfunctional offense in the league. Atlanta has more talent on offense than almost anybody in the league. And by the way, their defense is completely decimated with injuries. 4 of their key players have been out or are out for most of the season. Sarkisian can't get laid in the monkey whorehouse with fistful of bananas calling plays, and you're going to lay 9 against an NFL franchise? You know, I'm just telling you, this is the weekend of the – mark my words, everybody listening. This weekend you're going to see more dogs cover than you are favorites. They did last week. Matter of fact, Adam, just a little stat for you, if you can find one. I'm looking for a couple of them here as we're talking. Home dogs in the NFL this year, I have not seen this stat, and I'm not sure that, you know, San Francisco, Seattle, Pittsburgh, okay, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, Carolina, there's 3 teams, all are getting points at home. Home dogs are 60% this year in the NFL, Adam. That's an unbelievable number.
Yeah, I mean, is it parity? Is that what it is? Is it just inconsistency? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what word you want to use for it, but plenty of them certainly capable of barking here this week in the NFL. And this isn't a home dog, but the Chargers have a little bit of bark tonight based on what this line is telling us, because I think the spot alone for Kansas City is worth 3.5. Short week, Arrowhead, primetime, division on the line, huge game for both of these teams, but a lot of factors in Kansas City's favor, and yet here we are only at 3.5.
Yeah, Kansas City's won 20 out of their last 21 games in divisional play. I don't even think New England has that record. Think about that, folks. 20 out of 21. They beat San Diego 9 times in a row, 7-2 against the spread against them in those 9 straight-up wins. Arrowhead, I just got off the phone with the buddy there, 30 degrees tonight, light rain, winds from 15 to 25 miles an hour. That's the equalizer in this game. It's not wet weather. It's not rain. You know, it's wind that affects them. Both these teams like to air it out, but I think if San Diego has a chance in this game, even though Gordon's not going to play, it's running the ball. If you run the football against Kansas City, you can beat them. Baltimore almost did it last week with Dixon. He was falling forward for 6 yards a carry. Lamar Jackson was running around moving chains. Now, Phillip Rivers is not mobile. The first time these two played this year, Kansas City got luckier than lucky. Phillip Rivers, I watched that game. Phillip Rivers had 3 wide-open touchdown passes, hit them in the receiver's hands. They dropped all 3 in that game. And they could have easily beat Kansas City. Kansas City, obviously, sooner or later, Adam, you have to ask yourself this question about Kansas City. With that defense being so bad, how long before somebody figures it out? Now you're minus Spencer Ware, your second-string running back. You're minus one of the best running backs in the league because he couldn't keep his hands off a check. He's gone. Kareem Hunt's gone. And Hill is 50-50 at best tonight to play, and if he does play, he's going to be limited. Now it's on, basically a sophomore rookie's shoulders and Travis Kelce to get it done with a third-string running back and a hampered receiving core. I know they got Kelvin Benjamin. Watkins is still out, which is really hurting them. He was a big part of their offense. If San Diego's ever going to get a chance to get him, this probably is going to be it. And if they run the ball right at him and eat clock, keep Kansas City off the field, the hook on the 3 looks pretty tasty to me, Adam.
Well, very compelling argument there for sure, and the weather definitely a consideration, not just in this game tonight, but look, it's December. I don't think I have to tell everybody this, but it's December, so make sure that you're checking the weather forecasts for all of these games. Tony, I want to wrap up this segment with you talking a little bit of college basketball, because we haven't done that too much on the show this week, really because there haven't been a whole lot of games to discuss. Very light week in college basketball with finals and all that going on. Couple of really interesting games, actually a lot of interesting games on Saturday. We'll touch on a couple of them here with you. Villanova and Kansas, Fog Allen Fieldhouse. Villanova, obviously, not the same as last year's team. They lost a ton from last year. Lose that game to Penn on Tuesday night. Now a tough game at Kansas. Obviously, we don't have numbers for these, but what are you kind of thinking about that Villanova-Kansas matchup on Saturday?
Kansas, I've got a power rating of about 7.5, 8. And Fog Allen's worth 3 points. Villanova, it has trouble, and I'm having an epic college basketball season to date. I'm really kind of dialed in. I've been doing more work in the smaller conferences than I have these Power 5 conferences, so to speak. I concentrate a lot more on the smaller ones, but at the end of the day, Villanova lost to Furman, lost to Michigan. Both those were at home, by the way. And, of course, I've been on Penn a couple of times. Penn is a sneaky good basketball team. They're going to make a lot of noise out there in their conference. They got a guard-driven team, and it gave Villanova a lot of problems. Well, what do you think Kansas is going to do to them? Kansas is a guard-driven team. Their best player is still on the bench, probably till they start conference action. Their big guy, their new sensation, and they're still one of the top teams in the country. I think and I don't think, and by no means in that Penn game that you mentioned, Adam, Villanova was not looking ahead. Penn is a good basketball team. They put up a lot of points in a hurry. You don't get out and cover and match up well. And the other thing you noticed about Villanova in that game, they do not do well on transition defense this year. They have in the past. They're down a couple of notches from where they were last year, obviously, maybe 3 notches in my book. They were one of the most dominant defensive teams in the country last year and got upset with, we all know the story in the March Madness field. But at the end of the day, I think Kansas poses a lot of issues for them from a matchup standpoint, from a scheme standpoint, on a very, very, very strong home floor. I think Kansas, although they struggled against New Mexico State in that game in the Sprint Center last week, I'll tell you something, New Mexico State is no joke. There's another team, like I'm telling you about Penn. You take a look at New Mexico State this year, because they're going to give a lot of teams a ball game, and they're going to win a lot of basketball games, and they very well could be a tournament team. That being said, Kansas did not have their best night, especially in the first half in that game before they finally got the win. But I think this here, if you put a gun in my head right now and said you want to do a futures bet at Kansas minus 7.5 against Nova, I'd lay it with Kansas. And also, it's an early game, which means basically Nova's going to be playing about 9 o'clock their time in the morning, which is also a disadvantage.
All right, one game I want to tackle here, and, I mentioned this on the video I did yesterday on our YouTube page that, we've got some really good games in college basketball this week. Butler and Indiana, obviously a strong game there. Gonzaga, North Carolina, a lot of premier matchups. And as you said, you've been spending a lot of time on the lower conferences, the low majors, a lot of good value to be had in those, especially when you talk about a card like Saturdays where everyone wants to play Villanova, Kansas, Gonzaga, North Carolina, so on and so forth. How about this one? Northern Iowa and Iowa, one of those little brother, big brother types of games that we like to touch on. For Iowa here, they just knocked off Iowa State. Now they get another in-state team here in the Panthers. How about this one? This one's in Des Moines coming up here on Saturday.
Pardon me. Well, unfortunately, I don't think this is going to be a little brother knocking off a big brother in this one. Iowa... Northern Iowa this year, we all know I cover the Mo Valley. We talk about it all the time with you. And Northern Iowa's moniker, their biggest strength has always been their defense. And this year they're giving up 10 points more on defense than they are off. They're giving over 70 points a game. And that's unusual for Northern Iowa. But I don't see much of a contest here, to be honest with you. Obviously, Iowa, I had them written down here on a neutral floor. They should be around an 11-point favorite. You got a team here that's power rated at 168 right now at teamrankings.com. One of the teams one of the sites I use a lot, and they're allowing. This is the key stat. Opponents' effective field goal percentage. What are they allowing across board? 51% from the floor, Adam. And I know you don't follow the Mo Valley as much as I do, but you know, just from reputation, Northern Iowa doesn't allow anybody to shoot over 50% from the floor on them on a regular basis, and they're doing it right now. You know, they've got a win over Eastern Kentucky and Old Dominion. They beat Dubuque, basically community college. They got lit up by 32 against South Dakota State. You know, I mean, Utah State pounded them. You know, they did a away and home thing against Old Dominion and split there. But at the end of the day here, I think Iowa's got way too much talent, you know, against a team scoring, 63 points a game and allowing almost 74.
Yeah, when you look at Northern Iowa here on the year, only 5 steals per game, only 2 blocks per game. So that's not at all what we would expect from Northern Iowa defensively. And, you know, if you're a team that can't really play defense in the half court, you better figure out how to get some of those big plays, generate some of those turnovers, get some swats, all that kind of thing. Seems like Northern Iowa just not doing that here this year. But it's an important thing to keep in mind because a lot of people now are going to start making that transition into college basketball. They're going to sit there and think to themselves, hey, I remember what Northern Iowa used to do, you know, in the NCAA tournament or, you know, hanging right there with Wichita State, something like that. Maybe the Panthers just aren't that team this year. And it's very important to not fall in love with those things.
Yeah, I remember, you know, there was a team 5 years ago that beat Kansas in the Sweet 16. You know, Northern Iowa, they had a bunch of sharpshooters and they played defense. They did the old Bob Huggins style, full court press. You know, they rotated about 4 guys in with their starting 5. They were about 9 players deep on the bench, and they were just like a swarm of bees everywhere. You know, and that's been their MO for a long time. Even if they switch coaches, they've always kind of stayed with that theme. But you're talking about a team here this year that's given up 73 points a game against a team with an effective field goal percentage of 52.3% and scoring 82 a game. I think it's a total mismatch. If there's a blowout to be had where big brother's playing little brother, and Iowa's well coached, they're not going to overlook them. You know, it's a big game. They know, you know, this is, you know, David versus Goliath deal, and they'll have those players coached up, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see Iowa have 80-plus here.
Tony George, professional handicapper exclusively over at Doc Sports. What do you guys have going on right now, Tony?
Well, we're on an epic basketball run. I'll give everybody a 20% discount code today. I'm on a 29-7 run in college and NBA combined, 19-3 alone in the NBA. We're just absolutely dialed in. If you go over to DocSports.com and you want to purchase a monthly package in college or pro basketball, there pops up a promo box. You just type in the word EPIC20, just 20, EPIC20, and you'll get 20% off either a monthly or college basketball package. Don't forget, college basketball right around the corner. I'm on a 10-3 run in college hoops as well. So jump on board and give us a 30-day trial. Those are guaranteed packages. You either get positive units or you continue to play with me after the 30-day period until I gain back any units I would have lost for you. But right now, we're racking up some units in hoops and enjoying it thoroughly. 9th in the country last year in the NBA at a respected monitor, Adam, and in the top 10 again this year, and continuing to pummel the book. So be sure and jump on board there at DocSports.com.
Tony George, whose work you can find over at Doc Sports and on Twitter at TGeorgeSports. Appreciate the time as always, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week.
Yeah, right before the holidays. Looking forward to it, Adam.